This is a demonstration, to me, a very clear demonstration that atheism does not hold the high ground. This standard being imposed on theists, if imposed on atheists, their whole worldview collapses. They have a double standard.
There's not a time zone in which he's not being praised. Listen to me, there is not a moment since the resurrection of Jesus where there's not someone somewhere declaring that Jesus saves.
The God hypothesis. Atheists assume evolution explains everything. This is their creed. Yet we recognize that, if you go back to episode 1, that Dawkins acknowledges and openly admits, that there are things beyond comprehension. There's things that they don't know perfectly or known imperfectly, and that he hopes someday that we will know them, but only know them within the natural system. The deck is stacked. The God hypothesis. So they apply this to religion. They say that basically that atheism and evolution answer everything. They apply that principle to religion. So like Dawkins, most atheists believe that religion evolved from some primitive tribal animism, then into kind of a polytheistic system, later into what we'd call monotheistic religions. And of course, they think that they are that final rung on the evolutionary ladder as atheists. However, they are not. So atheists examine the history of religions with the above presupposition. I read that in my notes. I should have caught that. Atheists, they evaluate all religion and all of religious history based on the presupposition that everything has evolved. In doing so, I want you to understand, in doing so, they are already stacking the deck. They're saying that monotheism is a later development. However, there is no substantial evidence that would demonstrate that polytheism predates monotheism. You have to start with that belief, and starting with that belief, then begin to assess religions. They stack the deck here again. Yet an honest evaluation of the oldest aspects of several religions, including, I would say this, including Hinduism and the oldest forms of it, if you get down to, if you will, kind of the primitive Vedic concepts, right? That there's this one being, okay? Now, I'm not saying that they perfectly understand or perfectly believe the same thing a monotheist would, but you can go back, you can see this in many of the Native American religions, that there's one spirit or one being, one divine being that is revealed or manifest or making itself known in various ways. We do see that. Now, some would say, well, that's polytheism. That's not necessarily how they understood that. That's a novice looking at religions. That's a novice trying to evaluate things already based on their own beliefs that they bring to it. So just because you go into a culture or religion and you see that they've got this concept of one spirit, one being, and they might call it several different names, and because you see them offering worship in, if you will, in nature, you might say, well, so this is animism. Not necessarily. What you may not understand, because you haven't really taken a deep dive into this, is that in these activities, they believe that they are worshiping the one spirit or the one divine being. And so what many have done is they've misunderstood these activities, these so-called pious activities of these worshipers, although I would state that they were wrong in their actions and beliefs, but have misunderstood and say, well, this is animism, this is polytheism. And so what we've done, or well, not what I've done, what atheists have done, and by and large what we've allowed this to happen, is they've superimposed this predetermined construct over the history of religions, and therefore all religions must be interpreted through this alleged progressive understanding of religion. Yet, when you analyze many of these ancient faiths, you find just the opposite. What appears to me to be true is that monotheism is the original religious belief, and it's altered through different variations. There's different iterations, and as it begins to continue to devolve, we find it devolving into polytheism. Certainly there is true polytheism in other religions. But that isn't the beginning or a stage before monotheism. I think it is a devolving as it moves out away from. Now, Dawkins cites Sir James Frazer's Golden Bow. I read this when I was working in PhD studies at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in World Religions. And the interesting thing about, he quotes Frazer's book, The Golden Bow, by the way, the bow meaning branch, as a reliable source. Yet the source is based on mere speculation and has received severe criticism from all sides of the debate. So here's what you have, is you have a scientist jumping into the world of theology and religion, and he's going to quote a source that he thinks is reliable and dependable, yet Frazer's Golden Bow is no longer considered, if you will, an academic work on the history of religions. It would, I think, if anything, it's just simply would be understood in the way that evolutionary academics have superimposed this structure and then really make up from whole cloth, just create this idea that religion evolved. That work should not even be included in a serious conversation about the history of religion. It can be included in a conversation about the history of atheistic evolutionary interpretation of religion, but not in the history of religion. Dawkins says Paul founded Christianity. Again, I've got to show this. I've got to show this. This is one of those points where you just have to understand that this man truly has no idea what he's talking about when he's talking about Christianity. Now, what he does know is he knows Christians. He knows Christians, and he's just going to try to pick you apart. And you're going to jump on these things, okay? Actually, here's what you have. Who is the leader of early Christianity after the death, burial, and resurrection and ascension of Jesus Christ? Paul is not the leader of Christianity. No, he is not. Paul is not the leader. And here's what happens is you've got someone like Dawkins who picks up a Bible in the West. You've got the Gospels, then Acts, and then Paul's letters. And Paul certainly plays a very important role in Western Christianity. But you go back and you can look, and of course you see this in the Eastern canon and the earliest canons, is that James and what we know as the Catholic or general epistles follow the book of Acts. James is the leader of Christianity. James, the brother of Jesus, is the leader of Christianity until his death. So no, Paul doesn't create it. This, again, is just another absurd claim. Most Christians don't know enough about Christianity to even be able to refute this, but I think we can just start by saying, okay, absolutely not. This is a typical tactic, though. They want to separate Paul from Jesus. That's the goal here. Even a cursory reading of Paul's writings, though, demonstrates his commitment to Jesus Christ was truly second to none. Paul's writings share the theological concepts with other authors, including James and Jude, the brothers of Jesus. Some say, well, James and Paul conflict. They contradict each other. Well, understand, maybe you just bought your first dollar store Bible, and you've jumped in and you read 2 or 3 verses and say, I've now proved Christians wrong. Well, go ahead and get your refund, okay, because this isn't how it works. No, James is saying that your faith is validated. It is vindicated in your works. In other words, it's shown to be genuine or true. Not that you're saved by works. And some say, well, in English it says justified. Aren't we justified by faith? And James says we're justified by works. Well, again, that's English. And so when you go back and you look at the word in the original language, in the Greek New Testament, you understand that there's a range of meanings there. And that meaning of that word can also be to vindicate or validate. And if you look at his examples in James, he's showing people who validated their faith. For example, just Abraham, Rahab. They validate their faith through their works or their actions. So there's no contradiction there. Again, I mean, you see how quick we can dismantle this attack. They want to attempt to discredit theology and claim it's not a scientific discipline. And of course, the problem is, again, here's a problem that we run into. The reason that most Christians may even be tempted to agree that theology is not a scientific discipline is because we have people that are dipping their toes in to theology and in running around making bold statements, bold theological statements. I mean, we live in a day and time when basically all you have to do is be good-looking, a decent speaker, and have some very minimal understanding of the Bible, and you can stand in front of people and teach and preach and pastor and lead thousands of people who themselves don't know any better. And so that's the danger. We live in a time where biblical, not just biblical fidelity has collapsed, but the biblical ignorance is, frankly, in my short life, is at its peak. So less and less people know what the Bible actually teaches. They see theology as basically someone just throws together a Bible study at work, or you pick up some Bible study guide and just anybody can do theology. Truly, I mean, you can if you study and you are willing to put in the time and the effort. Yes, you can learn to be a theologian. You can be trained to be a theologian. You can't just sit on your couch with your iPhone, Googling quotes and then throwing them on social media and then pretending to be a theologian. That's not what theologians do. But however, that's what the world sees, and therefore theology is considered by most atheists as something that's not noble. You think about it. When was the last time that you saw someone just throwing some quotes around, about rocket scientists, or claiming they could just jump into the discipline of rocket science? When was the last time you saw someone just throwing around quotes they could just jump into brain surgery? When we think about the soul and the eternality of the soul, we need to be careful just pretending that just anyone can do theology. You might say, "Oh, somebody's offended now. Well, I can read my Bible." Well, yeah, we can read, but do you have the tools to rightly interpret? That's the thing, is if you've been trained to rightly handle the Bible. That's a whole nother discussion. Promoting evolution as settled science. This is a tactic the atheists often employed. Well, the majority say so. All the facts point to it. Well, the facts interpreted the way you believe, of course, they're going to substantiate your beliefs. I mean, it's an argument. Basically, you start on one side of the circle and you just keep going around and around. You start with, okay, there is no God, there can't be a God, and no matter what, we're always going to interpret the evidence as if there's no God. And you're just going around. You come back and say, see, there's no God. And you just keep doing that and doing that and doing that. And so they do this with evolution. Evolution's settled. It's proven. Well, everybody who says it's settled and proven is someone who started with the belief that it was already settled and proven. And so, yeah, I guess you're always going to win the day there, right? So here's the interesting thing. While stating it is illogical to demand complete documentation of every step of any narrative, whether in evolution or in science, Dawkins states that evolution is settled. Let me go back to that. He's promoting evolutionary science as settled while stating that it is illogical to demand complete documentation of every step of any narrative, whether in evolution or any other science. Here's what we're acknowledging. There's gaps, substantial gaps. See, those who hold to evolution know that. These are seismic gaps, seismic steps. It takes a huge amount of creativity, a massive amount of faith to fill these massive gaps within the evolutionary framework. Yet, here's what you have. You have a man saying it's illogical to demand complete documentation of every step of any narrative. But isn't that what you claim that you have to have before you'll believe creationism or Christianity? It's a double standard. Here's the deal. You don't have enough evidence, Christian, to show me, to convince me of the truth. Theists, there's not enough evidence. Creationists, there's not enough evidence. Look to atheism, look to evolution. You say, hey, there's not enough evidence. Hey, who are you? Wait a minute. Whoa. That's illogical to demand that we be able to demonstrate at every step, at every point, our worldview. And you just do this. You just drop the mic, okay? Just drop the mic right there. They've shown their hand. This is a demonstration to me, a very clear demonstration that atheism does not hold the high ground. Cannot hold the high ground. This standard being imposed on theists, if imposed on atheists, their whole worldview collapses. They have a double standard. Theists are demanding that Not every gap be filled, but just a few. Just few. See, this is what I heard someone tell me the other day. Well, I believe atheism, and I believe evolution. And I just sit there, and I look, and I watch the person's reactions. And it's just a political statement. It's just a worldview statement. It's not something they actually believe. It's something that they want to believe because in their worldview, with them as God, they need God not to exist. And so evolution is an excuse. That's all they're looking for. They're looking for an excuse. That's it, an excuse to live as if they are God. Of course, Dawkins openly admits that he will never debate a creationist on page 318. Here's why he says he won't debate them, because if he debates them, it gives validity to their view. That's funny. No, it's because a well-trained creationist is going to show all the facts are the same for both Dawkins and the creationist, and is going to show how he starts with his presupposition. The creation starts with his presuppositions, and they're both interpreting the same evidence. He doesn't want you to know that the creationist has the same evidence as the atheist, as the evolutionist. They have the same evidence. He doesn't want you to know that. He wants you to think that creationists are ignoring the evidence, that he's the one that truly is looking at the evidence, and the creationists are over here with a blindfold on, looking at nothing, just with their eyes closed, hoping that what they believe is true. Yet we see he's saying it's illogical to demand that these gaps be fulfilled or be filled. He's saying it's illogical. Don't demand all these gaps be filled. Look, if there's things we don't know, we hope someday to understand them within our own predetermined worldview and conclusions. That's simply the coward's way out. The deck is always stacked for the atheist. You need to know that when you come into the conversation. When you come in being defensive, you are going to lose. You must go on the defensive. Here's the reality. Is in this book, basically Dawkins is saying he can't be wrong. Could he ever be wrong? Could he? He says even if no scientists come up with an explanation, and what's he talking about? For the appearance of design in biology. That's what he's talking about. Even if no scientists come up with an explanation for the appearance of design in biology, it is plain bad logic to assume that design will favor any better. Here's what he's saying here. Basically is this. Even if the evidence, as you look at it, just plain, and it looks like it has the appearance of design, a designer is not going to be the better explanation. And again, he sounds more like an apocalyptic preacher here who believes everything's a sign of the times. You can see it, but you may not be able to see it, but you're going to have to trust me on this. I can just picture it now. I mean, think about it. Had he not chosen biology, this man would have been a great sensationalist preacher. Look, I know you can't see it, but you're just going to trust me on this. I know what you see, maybe you think makes sense to you, but you can't trust that. You got to trust me. I know that many say that there's appearance of design in biology, but you can't believe that there would be a designer. That's not necessarily the best conclusion. Dawkins ridicules Dr. Michael Behe, a biochemist who believes that the irreducible complexity of aspects of cells supports the intelligent design theory. Dawkins states that Behe needs a bigger imagination. Folks, are you not hearing me? You can read the book yourself, page 157. So you have a reputable scientist in Dr. Michael Behe. He's a biochemist who's just taken an honest look at the evidence and saying that the irreducible complexity of aspects of cells supports an intelligent design theory. And what Dawkins says is, well, he just needs a bigger imagination. Okay, appearance of design, scientist says there's a designer. Another scientist who's so rabidly committed to atheism says this man just needs a bigger imagination. Think about what we've heard in Dawkins' book so far. You basically, you believe, you have faith that you'll get all the answers someday based on the system you already hold to. You hope that you have answers within that system. You need a bigger imagination beyond a designer, beyond a creator. Wow. He goes farther and attacks Dr. Kurt Wise, who received an education at the University of Chicago and Harvard, because he's a creationist, page 321. Dawkins hates fundamentalists, page 321. You see that as well. Because like fundamentalists, he hates anyone who will not just take his word for it. Either fall in line with Dawkins or be ridiculed. Regardless of your level of education, doesn't matter. If you don't fall in line with him, you'll be ridiculed. Dawkins' approach to the writings by Dr. Wise and by Dr. Behe, I think give most reasonable people would give you the impression, if you didn't know, let me step back. Let me unpack this. Richard Dawkins' attack on these men, if you didn't know his belief system and you aren't already either in or out of that camp, take his belief system, use the same approach, his attitude and his approach, okay? And you just change the system, change the belief system. I could see Richard Dawkins as a cult leader. Why? Because you can't, there's no evidence for what I'm saying? Oh, you just need a bigger imagination. Oh, you don't believe what I believe? Well, that's just because you're backwoods, you're an idiot, you're stupid, you're dumb. Think about it. That's the tactics that are being employed here. That doesn't sound like reasonable engagement. Oh, hey, and I like this one. You know, the cult leader, Richard Dawkins, right? Imagine this. Oh, so you're looking at the science, you're looking at the facts. Oh, and the facts are causing you to say that it looks like, oh, there's design, and that would cause you to believe a designer. Oh, you must be stupid. Think about this. This is textbook cult leader stuff. Dawkins can dance around the Goldilocks theory, although he tries. He can't. Dawkins can't dance around the Goldilocks theory, although he tries throughout his book. Now, what is the Goldilocks principle? Basically, it's saying this, is that you have this idea that creation is perfectly established in a way that if one little thing is wrong, you can't have life. You can't have human life. You can't have life at all. Okay, so this is you can Google it, the Goldilocks theory. It's basically that these so minute details, that if even they were just slightly off, even a little bit, that there's life in the universe would be impossible if it just even the slightest alteration, okay? He just claims that statistics make it possible for a planet or planets like the Earth to exist, since there are likely billions of planets in the solar system, which itself is an unproven theory. So he's saying, oh no, it's just, if you just look at the statistics. So, all right, again, don't look at facts. Instead, he says, no, it's just statistics. So there's going to be enough planets, you need all these billions of planets, and then statistically there's going to have to be one with life on it. Total cop-out. Absolute, complete cop-out. Well, here's the reality, is that although physicists have calculated that if the laws and constants of physics had been even slightly different, the universe would have developed in such a way that life would not have been possible. Even these minute changes would have doomed life in the universe. Yet here's Dawkins' response. Then there must be many universes coexisting like bubbles of foam. No evidence for it whatsoever that there's multiple universes. No evidence for this. It is purely theory, speculative. It is theory. So, wait a minute. If this universe was even slightly different, you couldn't have life. Well, there must be multiple universes then. I mean, well, he is putting to practice what he preaches. His imagination is, well, it's grand, it's wide, and it's even wild. The other thing is, he says that religion's always bad. Well, of course, as I've already tried to point out, that atheism is religion. Religion is always bad. Dawkins believes against the evidence that humanity is evolving and that apart from religion, humans will improve. That is, He's saying without objective morals, humans will be motivated by natural selection to become better. But what's better? Who defines better? Think about this. Of course, he makes this statement while living in Western culture that's been directly and indirectly influenced by religious morality. And of course, he admits himself now he'd rather live in a Christian culture, yet without Christians, that is, without people who actually believe Christianity. He can only imagine a world that wasn't shaped by morality and particularly religion. And so when I say morality, he's going to say he holds to a morality, but I'm saying a morality shaped by religion. He can only imagine living in such a world. Who determines what's good, though? A world where he is God, so is Dawkins God, and he's going to determine what is good. That's the goal of atheism, is that you would be God, you would determine what is good. If there's no objective standard, then you are God. You are the one determining what is good. Dawkins then is God. Isn't it possible that what Dawkins and contemporary atheists define as good could easily be categorized as evil by the majority in the future? All right, let's just pick one example. Dawkins says this. He is pro-homosexual, okay? He doesn't believe that there's anything wrong with homosexuality. Isn't it possible, let's take a step back and just engage in a philosophical conversation. Isn't it possible that via natural selection, future generations, maybe 1,000 years from now, will view homosexuality as a waste of human resources and outlaw it? I'm not even talking about the moral question. Please, if that's where you're, step back from the emotions for just a minute and think about the argument that I'm making here. Isn't it possible via the worldview of natural selection, let's fast forward 1,000 years from now, that a future generation would view homosexuality as a waste of human resources and outlaw it under the idea of survival of the fittest? Remember, Dawkins says religion's a waste of resources, page 192. That is certainly possible. So if there's no standard of morality, what he says is moral today, regardless of your position on homosexuality, that's not the point. The point is, I'm just using it as an example. He says that we can be better. He holds a position that he says is moral and right and good and decent. Who's to say that a culture 500 years from now, the majority of culture doesn't say that that's bad and then impose punishments or penalties, regardless of religion, morality, the Bible, or any other holy book? See, that's the thing, is they're so inconsistent. They think that today that they are the pinnacle of evolutionary development, that they're thought, that they truly know what is better and things are only going to get better. And of course, and their idea of better is going to become more tolerant. But actually, what you discover is that people left to themselves typically become intolerant and tyrannical. So this idea that we're evolving to become more tolerant, well, I can tell you right now, the evidence just doesn't show that. In fact, those who are preaching tolerance are some of the most intolerant people that have ever lived, constantly forcing their worldview onto others. Dawkins believes that morality is derived from our Darwinian past. However, he never tells us who decides what's right or wrong other than just the majority, I guess the ruling elites, the ruling majority. So what happens when the majority shifts? Does morality shift? According to Dawkins, I guess it would. Dawkins speculates that there are 4 reasons why humanity will be motivated to be altruistic, generous, or moral towards each other, page 251. This is going to be an exercise in futility, I promise you, but you need to hear it. He says, don't worry, special cases of genetic kinship will motivate us. Yet, what world is this man living in? It's as if he sat down and started typing stuff and he closed himself off to the world around him. Genetic kinship will motivate us to become better or good. Apart from God, apart from morality, apart from religion, just genetic kinship on its own. Yet, mothers murdering their unborn babies, using semantics, saying instead of a baby, it's a fetus. It's just a mass of cells. It's just reproductive justice. Just changing. Those are just words. Those are just semantics. Okay? That is a life. Okay? A life, a living being. We say, well, it can't live on its own. Okay? That isn't the way we define life. Life isn't defined. You can live on your own, independent of other beings. I mean, think about this: a baby, when it is born, if left to itself, left by itself, will die. Okay, so is it not a life because it's dependent upon other beings? In fact, you think about it, we're all codependent on each other at all times. I mean, we don't live independent. We cannot, because we are constantly dependent, always, dependent upon the environment we live in, dependent upon, we have to have the air to breathe, we have to have food to eat. We are not independent beings. But he says a special case of genetic kinship. Yet, parents abuse their children. And in an atheistic evolutionary worldview, why would that be wrong? Why would it be wrong? I'm saying it's wrong. It is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. Why would it be wrong? Who is to say that killing the vulnerable or weak is wrong? Under an evolutionary worldview, it's a survival of the fittest. It wouldn't be wrong. You can't say it's wrong. There's no basis to say it's wrong. You say, well, the majority of society says it's wrong. What happens when the majority of society says it's right? There was a time the majority of this society said that killing unborn babies was wrong. Now we have many, maybe even a majority of voters in this nation who say that's right. I hope not. Does that mean that now it's shifting? What if it shifts back? Then is it wrong again? Number 2, he says reciprocation. That is, you do good for me, I'll do for you. Yet, it's easier to just take from a weaker person. To reciprocate is harder. This is how I got to use the word here. I don't mean to be mean, but this is how absolutely stupid this series of arguments is. We're going to get better because of this idea that within evolution that we're going to want to reciprocate good. I'm going to tell you right now, every human being is selfish. Every human being is selfish. At our core, we're selfish. We want, right? He says, well, since we want, we'll give to get. But I can tell you this, that the default is not to give to get. If so, it's oftentimes half-heartedly or impure, and the motives are certainly not there. And I'm not saying every situation that person's motives aren't right or aren't pure, but I can tell you this, most of the time our motives are selfish. It's actually easier to take from the weaker than to give to the equal. So that completely falls apart. How absolutely ridiculous. He says the Darwinian benefit of acquiring a reputation for generosity and kindness. Again, it's like the man just sat down and started typing stuff. I don't know if he drinks or not, if he was intoxicated, he was typing this stuff up. But the Darwinian benefit of acquiring a reputation for generosity and kindness? What? There's nothing inherently good about that in an atheistic worldview, in an evolutionary worldview. There's not. You say, well, then there's benefits to it. He says there'll be benefits to it. Like what? What benefits? The benefit would be to, in that worldview, to dominate, to own, to suppress, to subject. That's much easier. You don't need a reputation for being generous or kind when you can just take. Well, somebody should be raising the question, where is it scientifically proven that generosity and kindness would give you a good reputation in a Darwinian worldview? How is this a Darwinian benefit? What makes generosity or kindness good? Again, we've got a lot of questions to ask, but nobody's answering them. He goes on to say, conspicuous generosity is a way of buying unfakeably authentic advertising. Again, what? No. More of the same here, wishful thinking. Dawkins is truly a man of faith. Everything he's writing in here shows he's a man of faith. Yet he claims that he does not believe in evolution by faith. But he's propping it up by faith. Those who look at the evidence and say intelligent design, he says you need a bigger imagination. He lays out this creed, the Darwinian Dawkins creed of how we'll be better without God, and it just falls apart. It's just hocus pocus. It's a total sham. How do we know that we've evolved to call good what is actually good? What if we've evolved and we're calling good what is actually evil? Don't worry, just have faith. Dawkins will prove all of his unproven sermon points like a radical cult leader. let's wrap this up in this episode on encountering atheists. What we'll find here is that Dawkins is going to try to give you some case studies, yet in these case studies, the decision-making ignores the fact that people live in societies that have been shaped by religions. So what he wants to say is, look, in this society, that people want to acquire a reputation for being good and generous, and that proves that we're evolving to do that. Yet he ignores the fact that that culture itself has been shaped by religion, been influenced by religion. Absolutely absurd. You can see more of that on page 258. Of course, if you believe the Ten Commandments, according to Dawkins, which is a foundational religious teaching that has influenced Western society, law codes, then according to Dawkins, page 268, then you are an idiot and from the boondocks. Yeah, definitely sounds like a scientist, definitely sounds convincing to me. I'm just going to put my Bible up and never open it again, because I wouldn't want someone who has so laid out such a strong argument for atheism to think that I'm from the boondocks or an idiot. Dawkins adopts the tired and worn out arguments that the Hebrews were theological beggars, borrowed all their teachings from everybody else, but yet we've heard this over and over and over. It's as if he got on Wikipedia before he typed up this book and just threw some things together because someone was cutting him a check. What about this? Religion and evil acts. Dawkins quotes Stephen Weinberg, who said, religion is an insult to human dignity. With or without it, you have good people doing good things and evil people doing evil things. Of course, the problem is who's defining good, who's defining evil, who's the one establishing this standard. Clearly, no one is. They're borrowing from a Christian worldview to attack Christianity. He says this, but for good people to do evil things, it takes religion. That's a funny little twist. Again, these guys sound like a bunch of stump fundamentalist preachers preaching their doctrine. Don't worry, just believe us, even if we're inconsistent and we sound absurd. Don't worry, the evidence isn't there. We'll show you later. Who defines what is good and evil? Ultimately, they do. Why? Because an atheist has become his own or her own God. Well, here's the deal. I want to just mention this as I kind of close. Can't the same be said of atheism? For so-called good people defined by ruling elites to do evil things defined by ruling elites, it just takes atheism. You say the same thing. Here's the deal. I've read the books. I've read the books by the Four Horsemen. I've read these atheistic blogs, websites, watched the YouTube videos, continue to analyze the works. There's just nothing new here. Absolutely nothing new. There's nothing of any substance, folks. They don't hold the high ground. They do not. They do not hold the philosophical high ground. They do not hold the scientific high ground. Here's the thing, is that we've got the good news. Part of preaching the good news is dismantling false and faulty worldviews so that we can preach the gospel and see people set free. Well, until then, there can be no excuses. There will be no retreat, absolutely no surrender, right? Because Jesus Christ is King.